Welcome to the Peer 150 webinar series. I am Mike Kaiser, co-founder of the Peer 150, and today I am joined by Pat Waiters, Chief Talent Officer at ServiceNow. Thanks, Pat, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Excited to be here.
Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping notes. You can go to our website at thepeer150.com and click the webinar series tab, and you can see all the past and future webinars, along with links to recordings if you missed a prior one. Also, you will be receiving a follow-up email with the link to this specific webinar after the session. Also, I'd like to take a moment to thank our partner and support of the webinar series, First Tech Credit Union. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting this initiative as well as the Peer 150 mission. Finally, before we get started, a quick note on the Zoom platform. If you'd like to ask Pat a question, please use the Q&A section. If you see a question on there that you would like answered, please upvote that. Those questions will rise to the top. And within this hour, we'll try to get to as many of those questions for Pat as we can. So Pat, again, thank you for joining us. And if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself, background, organization, and your role.
Sure. I have the privilege of running global HR for ServiceNow. Been with the company almost 3 years. September will be 3 years. And super excited to be here. It's a pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you. So with today being Juneteenth, as a couple of people have mentioned in the chat already, as well as Pride Month, lots of more awareness of what these represent with the social issues going on. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at ServiceNow to help your employees with some of the causes they believe in?
Oh, sure. Gosh, I don't think we have enough time. So what we're doing is we are leaning into learning. So the best way to figure out how to be the best ally, to be the best partner, to be the best whoever you want to be, it's about educating yourself. And so this whole week has been a week of learning for our employees. We had a course on courageous conversations talking about race and ethnicity. We talked about what does it mean to be an ally versus an advocate versus a sponsor. There's so many nuances on this topic. We talked about intersectionality. We talked about the history of the Black community in the United States and the 401 years of discrimination and racism and social injustice, and just kind of reflected, not trying to act and solve problems in the moment, but really to seek to understand and learn. And that's really important. And it's important for us to encourage the majority, if you will, to take on their own learning and not have the marginalized employees take that burden on all of us. So we're really trying to make it easy, succinct, eye-opening, honest, caring. And today is Juneteenth, and it's the day of freedom. And what we made it for ServiceNow is a day of learning, a day of reflection. So many of our employees are working so hard. All of y'all are. And it's important to pause and reflect and learn and figure out where you are in your own personal journey and what you want to learn. There's so much amazing material out there. And so thank you for spending part of your day with us. I hope it's part of your educational journey. But if you need guidance and help, happy to share with the videos we're sharing and the conversations and tools we're using. And we had a Pride celebration event last night. That was super fun to go through those stories and the support our employees are feeling within ServiceNow. And I know that's not always true for everybody. And so I'm grateful for the blessings and feel more compelled than ever to create a safe place for everybody to be who they are.
Thanks, Pat. And you know, as you're talking, so many things that are out there that folks have to deal with as far as being well, and wellness is such a key, important factor in everything that we do, right? Our personal life, our social life, our work life. What are some of the challenges that you see in let's just project 6 to 12 months with employees and individuals around wellness and staying healthy and staying focused and being able to sort of weather the storm in a sense? What are some things that you can help folks with on what they should be looking for, what they should be approaching?
Love to. But real quick on this recording on the webinar, some of our attendees have asked, how do they respond to all attendees versus just all panelists? I'm not sure if everyone can see the comments, and I think the comments are very enriching when you crowdsource some of the great ideas, because you and I both know we have some ideas, but crowdsourcing them would be really amazing. So I want to make sure all voices are heard.
Yeah, absolutely. So the chat that folks are using just goes to the panelists. If you're an attendee out there, you want to use the Q&A, that should be open. You should be able to type in a question and you can comment on those questions as well. And then we will see those questions in that section to where we can ask those. The chats just go privately to Pat and myself.
Perfect. Just wanted the clarity so everyone felt they could be heard.
That's perfect.
So on wellness, I think COVID has brought to mind that we have to care not only for the employees, but for their entire family unit. What does that look like? So family care, integrated care, mental and physical care has gone into the front and center of our conversations like never before. Right. So I think some companies have talked about mental health. They've implemented programs like Lyra or EAP, and then it kind of stops there. It's rare that you would see an executive talk about anxiety or stress or how they navigate it, how they need to breathe and manage their day better. And so what we've started to do on this journey, because we've been doing wellness checks, mini surveys throughout COVID to hear our employees and what they're struggling with. And I feel the anxiety, the frustration, the stress, the ambiguity that's in front of all of us. And so we've had Dr. Sinha come and do a webinar with us, with our employees. It was extremely well attended and appreciated. Where we talked about our emotions. We talked about how to activate ourselves to acknowledge the emotion, what triggered that emotion, how best to navigate that emotion, how do you use physical activity to get yourself better grounded, the power of breathing. Mike, it was funny because I have been in moments just as recently as yesterday or 2 days ago where I have been back-to-back Zoom calls for 6 hours. And when I leave and I'm like hit like this on calls and emails and what about this and what about that, I can't breathe. Like I feel like the need to do a deep breath. Well, I'm sure I'm not alone. And in this webinar, we talked about the power of a deep breath. Like make sure between meetings, you take 2 or 3 really deep breaths, let them slowly out. Make sure you practice gratitude throughout your day. Times are hard, but gratitude helps center all of us. And get out and walk. Don't stay in front of that video all day long. It's not healthy for you mentally nor physically. Take a meeting on the phone call, tell people, be explicit on your navigation, and don't be guilty about exercise. If you're not healthy, it's like taking the oxygen mask. We as leaders need an oxygen mask first so we can care for others. Make sure you're caring for yourself. That's super, super important so you can be there for your family, for your coworkers, for your employees.
And you mentioned, I'm going to hop a little bit to a term I'm hearing a lot of now is Zoom fatigue, right? It's prior to the pandemic, many of us were obviously face-to-face type interactions as well as phone calls. And the video interaction, helps in a lot of ways, right? It creates some connections, but it can also be, as you said, very draining as far as being on camera a lot. You have a bad hair day and you have an issue, right? So can you talk a little bit about Zoom fatigue and what are some ways that companies can support their executives and employees with connecting with Zoom, because it's a good thing, but also being able to step back from those kinds of interactions?
Just be intentional. What's a phone call versus video, so people know in advance, first off. And if there's not materials being presented, and if you already know the individual, try to default to a phone call and take that walk around the block with that person. There's been many times I just needed that breath and that exercise to get me balanced. And I've taken this meeting on a call and did FaceTime and showed people where I was on my walk to show them the birds or an ocean or whatever it is. They appreciated that too, and it gave them permission to do the same. The value of video conferencing though, Mike, is the privilege that I have to get invited into your home, to know that you're a sports fan, what's behind you on the wall, to see my family as they interact with me. We are invited in a very personal way. And we didn't do that before COVID. If you think about how companies were using video technology before, it would be an emoticon that was shown up. We'd hear the voice, we'd look at a slide, but that was about it. And maybe a third of the employees would be on live video, but majority would elect not to for various reasons. I think we're leaning into it, and we're perfectly imperfect. And if I have a bad hair day, I'm putting my band on, or just go with it. I'm growing out my hair. I don't have a, place to get my hair cut. So I'm putting clips in. Who cares? What people care about is that we're human, that we're going through it together. I suggest all of us pause before we start meetings and talk about humanity and things happen in your life, and have a human moment. And by that, I mean, I had shared a couple of weeks back with my own team about sheltering in place and the unique moments that I'm now having with my family that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I actually, and God help me, don't tell my husband I'm sharing this, I had to cut his hair with the dog clippers because his hair was growing so big. And I'm like, dog clippers and hair clippers are kind of the same. Let's just go in the garage. I'll give you a clipping. That was a moment my kids and I will not forget. And I kind of left a patch kind of long. So I think I have to get better at my skills, but live life, appreciate the silver moments. Be okay being perfectly imperfect, Mike. I think that's what we need to be doing. And if you have fatigue, get up and stand. Even if we're on video right now and I stood up and moved my chair just so I could stand, that's fine. Like, encourage that in long meetings. Take a stand break. So everyone stand up while we're on this video. Let's move the body around. It'll keep us active and healthier. Be aware of that.
No, I can tell you, I call it COVID hair. Believe it or not, this is as long as my hair gets. I usually have the tight and high, and I still have COVID hair. I haven't gone to the dog clippers yet, but I might consider that here in a little bit. Sounds like a great way to go. With the Zoom fatigue, I think there's kind of this reverse thing going on too, where if I don't, it's all about transparency, and there is a connection there. If I choose, as you're saying, if I choose not to be on Zoom, I think I've heard from a lot of folks, there's times where that's viewed as, well, why not? What are you hiding? Why aren't you transparent? What's going on? And that's a challenge too for employees, right? If you're having that bad hair day or whatever it is, and you just don't want to be on that day, there's a lot of kind of that social feeling like I should be.
Then, Mike, I suggest and I encourage you you have to model it as leaders first. Like, hey, I'm not going to get on the Zoom today because I haven't showered, and you don't want to see me with pillow head and a t-shirt. Like, let's just get in the conversation, and life happens. I think that I'm an introvert, but I care so deeply, as do all of us. And so sometimes just go in that Zoom just to see how everyone's doing. Right. And if it's a day that your kids are going crazy, that there might be a graduation ceremony behind you, there might be someone cooking in the kitchen, putting yourself not in Zoom and or that digital panel behind you so we can't see all that and be distracted by that, that's cool too. But be deliberate. Don't be embarrassed by it. We're all going through it. I mean, that's the great thing about what's happening right now. We're all in it together in some odd way. And being intentional about that wonkiness is actually a nice feeling.
Yeah, and so one more question on that. And you kind of mentioned a little bit with the virtual backgrounds, but what would you say, and how would you help leaders help their employees, in a sense, on individuals that may have some self-conscious thoughts around what their home life's like, or what where they're at, and maybe people, places, things, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that are pretty private, right? And so how do you get those people to open up a little bit, but again, still going within their comfort zone?
Use a digital background that reflects your passion, your hobbies, the place you last had your vacation, something that resonates with you. It could be digital backdrops of your company and your company's values to reinforce the culture and what means most to you, right? So there's many different ways to reflect you. Doesn't have to be your home. There was someone in our Pride celebration yesterday gosh, we had several hundred people on it. And one employee was talking, and he was like, look, you can see my shoe tree behind me. You can see a box of whatever over here. And you can see I'm about to cook over there. This is where I work. This is where I live. Everyone loved it, right? Life is crashing together. I don't want to lose that, because when you try to compartmentalize too much, it's a strain on us. But if you want to be more private, you have that optionality too. Just try to reflect your personality.
Right. And I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into belonging, because I think that's something that is challenging in kind of a remote virtual world. What are your suggestions or thoughts around creating a sense of belonging for employees when, you don't have that informal interaction that some people really thrive on in an office? It's, granted, Zoom can create some of those connections, but it's very scheduled. It's like, okay, we're having this meeting at 12 o'clock, right? And here's what we're going to talk about. In the first 10 minutes, we're all going to socialize. Some people don't handle that structured thing as well as others. What are your suggestions for that feeling of belonging for those kind of folks?
There's so many creative ideas I'm seeing happening. There is book clubs cropping up where individuals, employees are sharing a book. They said, here's a book I'm going to read. Who wants to join me in reading it? Let's get together on Zoom and discuss what we learned. And a cooking class. We've had cooking classes. We had music jam sessions. We had just ways like in my own team, because we get invited into your home, we asked my team members, pick one object that is personal to you in your home, close by, and share it with your peers. And so I shared a Lego that my daughter had created. And my daughter has special needs, and she has such strength in creating these amazing Lego creations. Like, this is something that calms her, gives her focus, reduces anxiety, and just a sense of confidence that she gets from all this creativity and building. And so I shared one of her creations, and someone else shared a photo from their dad, and someone else shared a bronze baby shoe of their grandfather's, right? That's over like 100 years old. And so we got to know each other, and then we had to turn those objects into something that would help us either survive on a deserted island or rescue us from the island. And so we created magic powers around these objects, and we created breakout sessions, 3 people at a time, on how to use your object to break out of this island or survive and thrive in this island, and so on and so forth. There are ways to create moments of connection. Who am I? Can you see me? Can you hear me? What's unique? These coworkers would not have been aware of Katie's superpowers with Legos if I didn't have that task to do, that fun activity. I wouldn't have known about that bronze shoe and the history of bronzing and why does that shoe matter to this individual. Telling human stories, personal stories, who I am and what matters to me, creates a connective tissue that you don't usually get at work. And so I think we have to adapt on how we create that sense of belonging. The other thing with video is that everyone's got a front seat right now into our conversation. Like, they all have an opportunity to ask a question, to create a chat. Everyone has an opportunity to engage. It's not just a silent audience and then only a few get to log in on commentary. We're all, in the same format. And I can see everyone. So if you do gallery view and you can see everyone's backgrounds, I will start meetings like, hey, Susie, I love the background of the island behind you. Tell me more about that. And she's like, well, that was my vacation last year. I can't wait to go back and blah, blah, blah. I learned how to scuba dive and this person did this. And I'm telling them I see them. I acknowledge them, that I care about them. Those are amazing belonging moments that you can give to anyone if you pause and think about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way you kind of frame that a little bit, because one of the things as you were talking that I think really is a challenge with the Zoom world is you don't have those private, like I said, is in an office environment where you walk into 1 or 2 people and it's just you 3 talking and you're connecting in a very small group. It tends to be hey, let's have kind of a town hall and we're all on there. And like you said, even if you get the gallery view, there's 20 faces there. And there's a lot of people where that's pretty intimidating to not only speak up, but maybe be themselves in some ways and be transparent. do you have some ideas around how to help those folks that don't feel comfortable in a bigger setting for joking and talking about certain things, and they've kind of migrated more towards smaller groups?
Well, I think I'm an introvert, so I flourish better in smaller groups. The beauty of Zoom is that it only allows so many chiclets, I call them, on a screen. I don't see all the pages of chiclets. So I don't feel overwhelmed with the hundreds. I might see 20, and I feel calmer with 20. And I will look at you, or I will look at Susie, or I'll look at Joey. And if you're nodding at me and you're giving me encouragement, I don't lose all my energy. I don't feel so overwhelmed. So even for an introvert, I think this is a easier format. Plus, I can comment, I can chat without talking, right? So I can figure out a way to be heard, to be seen, that's comfortable for me. No one's asking you to do something that you're uncomfortable with.
And so I want to get a little bit of conversation around the back to office scenario, right? So for a lot of folks, the office was a primary social interactive place. I mean, that's where they maybe got their primary social fix, in a sense. You know, with what we're hearing and people's interest in hurrying back to the office versus waiting to see what happens and all the issues around that, that I think could be a fairly significant challenge for some people mentally and emotionally. And can you talk a little bit about your thoughts around what a future office will look like and what will be kind of the new norm as far as social interaction and that kind of a world versus maybe a split world between virtual and office, and just kind of the whole kind of landscape or that you see moving forward?
The employees now are experiencing a way of working. If you have an office job that's digital, most of us are working from home. And we have found a rhythm. Chapter 1 was just get home and be safe, right? And then figuring out where you're going to work in your home, your connectivity, least disruption. Do I use a digital backdrop? Do I not? All that is chapter 1. And there were so many times in those first few weeks where I would see a coworker that worked in their kitchen table and then went to the basement, then went into a closet or the garage to work and find their peace of mind. And so I think they figured out where to work now. I think they figured out their bandwidth. I think they figured out a bunch of stuff, so they feel less angst about that. Chapter 2 is realizing this is a marathon, not a sprint, and being intentional with their calendar. I think we have to learn to take those stretch breaks and breathing breaks. I made a comment on the Q&A just now about really schedule it. If you see your calendar running away with you, be intentional as you would for your own family. Like, what does it mean? I need every 2 to 3 hours to take a 15-minute stretch and breathing break. I might take 30 minutes so I can walk around the block, check in on my family, be present in the moment, laugh with a kid or two, and then leave, or even pick up your book that you love to read. Whatever it is that gets you peace of mind, center, schedule it, because you being the best you is what we want. First and foremost, I think in the new world, as we reopen offices, I think it's going to be a slow way to go. There's no winner's circle, meaning first in doesn't mean you win. There's risk to being first in. And employees want safety, psychological safety and physical safety. And so how we commute to work, if we're in a multi-use building, the PPE that we have on hand, how do we navigate this in physical distancing? Because in these first few months coming back into an office space, you're going to be wearing masks. You're going to be physically distant. You're not going to have the food that used to have out displayed and everyone kind of grabbing what they want. It's going to be way more measured and careful. It's not going to be the camaraderie you expect because people are going to go in there to do something and then go home. It'll be episodic for a purpose. And post-COVID, once we get a vaccination, once we have our hands around this or feel safer, I do believe that individuals will like the freedom and will want to come into the office a couple days a week, not 5 days a week. Nor will they want to come in for 8 to 10 hours a day. They may want to come in for 5 hours and go off and do something else. So I think we're going to have way more flexibility, way more choice. And we have to be okay with that as leaders, right? We shouldn't measure them on their success by the hours they put into a physical space, because then we lost the loss of that creativity, the flexibility, the empowerment will be felt by employees, and they'll go elsewhere where they get it.
Right. And, as you were talking, I think, I think you called it step one, right? And, step one was kind of getting in your home office and getting that all set. And I do believe in talking with a lot of folks that initially that was sort of what they thought. This is going to be a 4 to 8 week thing. I don't really like this a whole lot, but I can tolerate it. I've got the home life. A lot of people were, homeschooling. You got spouses, family around, and it's very hectic in a lot of ways for a lot of folks. But I think people went into it looking at, okay, this is temporary. The light's at the end of the tunnel in 8 weeks, and we'll be back to quote normal, right? And I think when you mentioned not a sprint, it's a marathon, I think people are starting to realize it's a marathon. And I think that's causing a lot of potential mental wellness challenges, right? Where psychologically it's like, well, how do I get my social interaction? Or am I ever going to have the same thing, relationships and things like that at work that I used to have? How would you help folks deal with that? And what are some of the things that executives can do to address those kinds of concerns?
Just have conversations, Mike. Ask them, do the wellness surveys, checking in. Do you feel like you have, solid relationships with your coworkers? Do you feel like you're supported? Like, seek to understand, and where you have hot spots, dive in, and again, seek to understand the root cause and how can you adapt. I think I've always believed in the theory of false constraints to create creativity in our thinking. Like, imagine a world where there were no cars. What would we do, right? How would we get around? We'd fly. I don't know. But now imagine a world where we're all working digitally. How would we, get our fix on socialization and feeling cared for and heard? How will we get work done? How will we get our work and performance managed stuff done? How will we blank? And if you think along those lines, we will be better served because we'll anticipate and we'll ask questions we wouldn't otherwise have asked, and adapt where we need to. For me, I actually do calls. I make random calls or text or chat or Slack people and say, hey, I'm just checking in. How are you? How's your family? Get in a conversation, just saying, how are you? Not giving them work, not talking about a work topic or a goal, just checking in. The things I hear when I just check in are gifts. Just check in. Don't always have a goal in mind. I think with ambiguity, we want to do our checklist because we get endorphins from getting stuff done. I think checking with another human being on your team and a coworker is just as rewarding. Put it in your calendar, figure out a way just to pause, to breathe, and ask how you're doing, and let a natural conversation go for 15 minutes and then hang up and then talk to your family. But we've got to be intentional with our community, and that's our digital community as well as the neighbors.
Yeah. And it's interesting, again, as we were talking, I've heard a lot of folks say, hey, when we get back to an office environment, I think you kind of mentioned it, is, hey, maybe it's 3 days a week, maybe it's 5 hours at a time. And I think there's that aspect where people are going in for specific reasons, right, from the work standpoint, but I do think there'll be some people that will want to come into the office for the social part of it, right, to interact with certain folks. How much, and the chances now of, if you were working part-time, you go into the office and everybody that you expect would be there is there. That's not going to be the case in the future, right? You may go in on a Monday and the person that you really wanted to interact with or communicate with for whatever reason is going in on a Tuesday. Do you have any ideas or suggestions on how to help manage that, not only for the employees, but for the executives that are trying to manage their workforce and have the most effective interactions and collaboration they can get? That seems like it's going to be a challenge moving forward.
Well, we have technology to do scheduling, right? So if organizations have a bunch of folks that are anxious to get back in the workplace, for example, Hyderabad and Bangalore, we have a large workforce. They are living in smaller domains with multi-generations. They have issues or challenges with connectivity, and they miss the socialization. So when we start opening up those offices, a majority of employees are like, let me in. But we're going to be mindful in gates. Like first, it's going to be 15% of our employees get to come in, then 35 or 50%, and so on and so forth as we figure this out and learn from our mistakes. I think when people are wanting that social interaction and or need it to do innovation and or to do a topic like close your financial books, for example, and riff on a whiteboard together and brainstorm on something, then be mindful of that and invite that team on the same day, figure out the day and works for everyone where they feel safe. But even in my normal workday, Mike, 60% of my direct staff works at other places. So I'd still have part digital and part physical. There's a lot of managers that bring their employees into the workspace because they love the energy. It's their need, not the employee's need. So be aware of yourself when you need that social boost, then create a more enjoyable reason to come into the office for your employees for that episodic event, to celebrate a launch, to innovate on something, to bring your lunch to work and have a distant lunch together and just check in moment. That is, we're going to have to be more creative in how we socialize and how we talk, because you can be physically distanced and have great social interaction. We're doing it now in my neighborhood. I'm knowing more about my neighbors in the last few months than I ever did before for years. So these are gifts. I think we'll find a way to do it as long as we're adaptive and curious to figure it out.
Yeah, and there's a question from the audience that I think kind of relates to this a little bit, and I think you may have answered a little bit, but I'm an introvert too, so it works well, right? You can kind of get that interaction when you need it, and you can kind of focus when you need it. There are the extrovert people that they thrive off the energy of others. That's how they get creative, or that's how they really get energy and focus. And that's a real challenge right now. And the questions around, he's seeing a lot of anxiety issues with that, that group of people, the ones that are wanting that social interaction to thrive and energize themselves and be motivated. And again, that's going to be a challenge, not only in the future workforce, but right now where everything really is virtual. There are not a lot of offices that are open. You mentioned a few things that maybe you can create some things, but do you have any other ideas around how you keep these individuals from, kind of going nuts, working by themselves in a home office?
So being alone is hard. Some people thrive in that. Some don't. Extroverts have a really hard time being alone. And what we've done is scheduled socialization events throughout the week just to get random people together. Like I said, music, learning how to write a song, learning how to cook, a book club, jam session with the DJ, different things. And you find those extroverts just going into those things. We need to provide them outlets. We just launched a program called, Perk Allowance program for 2020 that gives every employee around the globe X dollars to buy meditation apps, to tutoring, cooking lessons, wellness, Pilates class, virtual classes where they can be encouraged to find social outlets even outside of the workplace, so they feel better connected to the humanity around them, to their mental and physical health around them, to give them choice, because we feel better when we have choice. That's a fact. And so giving them choices to socialize with their team, with coworkers they don't know yet, but could know in other locations, even other countries, and then into a bigger realm of possibilities outside of our virtual walls. So give them resources, ask your benefits teams what their recommendations are, crowdsource them in your employee events. What are you doing to stay socially engaged if you're an extrovert? And as an introvert, how are you finding your space when you're always on Zoom? I guarantee your employees have creative ideas. Mind them, share them, copy shamelessly. That's what I do.
So another question that came up that I wanted to get your perspective on, we talked about flexibility and, the importance of flexibility in today's environment with wellness. And, there might be some inequities between exempt and non-exempt employees. Exempt, it's really easy to say, hey, this is your job, get your job done, where you're rated on performance. And they have that flexibility, where there may be some perception that in the non-exempt, where it's, a little bit more structured. Any ideas on do you just treat those non-exempt as exempt in a sense with the flexibility? Is that compliant? What's your thoughts around that?
Yes and no. I mean, if you think about a call center, right, you need to be reliable, right? You need to have a schedule. You need to understand the metrics that you have, but it doesn't mean you don't have flexibility. So with our support teams, we have them on schedules, and maybe those schedules are way more flexible than they used to be. Maybe you're an early bird and you want to get started at 6 a.m. and be done by 2 p.m. so you can get on that bike ride. Maybe you're a late bird. I think as long as you cover the globe and the hours of support needed, we can adapt, right? We've learned that we can innovate in a digital way. We know that we can be more productive in a digital way if we don't have that commute in front of us of an hour each way, and getting our work set up and so on and so forth. I think for the non-exempt workers, it's being a little bit more flexible on scheduling as needed, being more comfortable when life and work kind of blend. I think that I've seen, even with my own personal experience calling other companies up for care, right? I have a customer issue, blah, blah, blah. They're answering their calls from home, right? And they're logged in and they're doing their work, and hear a dog barking, but it doesn't matter anymore. I think our tolerance and acceptance of all nuances is a very high level right now. I don't want to lose that.
And so I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into culture. I think a company's culture is, historically critical about, attracting talent, keeping people motivated, things around that. Culture can be extremely difficult to keep alive in a virtual environment. And it really provides a sense of belonging for a lot of folks, right? You're in a sense, an identity of my workplace is the culture of the organization. It becomes who they are in a lot of people. Can you talk a little bit about culture in a virtual environment? Is it even possible? How do you keep it going? How do you reinforce it?
So culture is always there. You don't lose culture; it just evolves. I find it interesting when I hear even my own peers talk about we've lost the culture, we got to reinvigorate the culture, we got to do. And I go, what is it that you're worried about? What is it that you're seeing or not seeing that worries you? Give me better framing, because we have a culture, right? And how we treat one another, how we lean into our employees, our policies, our practices, how we manage our employees, and where you really and physically is your employee experience. That is your culture. If you are worried to indoctrinate new hires, that's a fair question and concern to our culture. What does that look like? Well, we have certain beliefs in our company. We believe in being hungry and humble. We believe in having open, honest conversations. We believe in integrity. We believe in being your authentic self and creating a sense of belonging. And so you can create digital framing behind you on your videos that reinforce those cultural tenets. You can talk about decisions as it relates to our values and our culture, so people understand the context in which you're making a decision. You can get better at tying those things back to what we stand for, what we believe in. Because ServiceNow believes in a culture of belonging, where everyone should have a right to their opinions. You don't have to agree with me, but you'd have to respect it. Don't debate my point of view. Seek to understand my point of view would be a better approach. And so we're modeling that in these times of social unrest. You may not have exposure to a very diverse network in your own personal life, but we have it at work. So seek to understand how they're experiencing the company and how can we help them. And so that intentionality will reinforce your culture. It'll actually make it flourish.
And I think there's a couple questions, right along the lines of what you're talking about. And, I think the culture may help in some of these, perspectives. But, there's a couple questions around employees and senior leadership's opinions on change, right? And that could encompass a lot of things. A lot of folks are seeing change in the social world, and people are very passionate about it. And they might take that same passion into the workforce and say, hey, we don't do this or we don't do that, and I want change. And culture can help you with that, but it's also a challenge when you have such strong, passionate opinions about certain topics or issues. One of the things that was brought up was, we're coming back to the office and we're going to require masks. Some people would be passionate that, hey, there's no science around that. That's not something I want to do. We don't need to do that. I know it's a tough huge question, but any advice for executives that are facing these kinds of challenges with back to the work or even just social change within the organization?
You gotta you gotta set the guiding principles that you believe in and have a rationale why you have them, and then stick to them. Not everyone's going to like them, right? Leading is hard. There's going to be, people, statistically speaking, that fight that change or that rule or that process or that policy. Everyone has choice which door they walk into every day. I'll walk into this company or that company. And so as leaders, we got to be clear what we believe in. When I open up our offices, you will wear a mask. Why? Because it's not safety of you or your convenience, it's safety of others. We believe in that strongly, and therefore we will wear masks. You will not come to work if you're sick or if someone in your immediate family is sick in your home. We want you and them to be safe. We will practice physical distancing, so on and so forth. We will have these guidelines. The question comes in, what if you violate those guidelines, right? Like any policy or practice, you will have a discussion. Why are you violating it? Why do you think it's okay to not have a mask or come into the office blank, right? And not adhere to our practices. And if they're like, I don't believe in it, then just say, stay home. That is your choice. Work from home. And if you don't want to work from home and you don't want to come into the office, then let's have that really tough conversation. What does that mean? Because sometimes it's not a choice, and that's hard.
Yeah, what would you say for folks, and I think it's along the same lines, just interesting to get your perspective, is, mask is kind of maybe an easier one. You can see it, and those kinds of things. There's going to be a lot of what I would say social distancing recommendations, right? Hey, stay 6 feet away, and, those kinds of things. Wipe down things, or, I don't know what they would be, but, cleanliness things, spray things after you've touched them, things like that. And let's say there's a group of folks that aren't following that and they're comfortable with their interaction. A department that says, you know what, we're going to loosen these things up a little bit. We're all fine with it. All 12 of us are okay with it. Obviously somebody else gets introduced to that and goes, whoa, that's not what I expected. How would you deal with that kind of situation as far as the conversation around it? You don't want to get people saying, hey, we're, reporting you kind of thing, but you also want to adhere to your standards that you put in place. Any good advice for those kinds of situations?
I call it a clean elevation. Just have an honest dialogue up, right? As a team, we're showing up differently. These were the guidelines we were all given. We're struggling with all applying them. Let's have a conversation, a direct conversation. I call it a rumble. If any of y'all have seen Brene Brown in the Rumble, I love it. I'm a fangirl of Brene. Would love to meet her someday. But a rumble is this great thing. You and I can debate the bottle, but not demean each other. We can talk about the situation and have an intellectual debate about it and our perception about it, and then decide how we want to lead going forward as a team. And as a leader, having a rumble about why is this not working for us? Is there another way to approach it? But then a decision has to be made. And it's not a democracy at work. It just isn't. And so there's going to be a decider. And at that point in time, once it's elevated, we decide as a team, we're going to comply to these policies. If you choose you can't, then your choice is to go home and work from home and do it digitally. We've figured out how to do it, so there's no harm, no foul. But we have cleanliness schedules, we have protocol, we have an indoor and an outdoor. Don't go in the outdoor. We need to adhere to it for care for others, and just have that rumble of honesty, and then align as a team dynamic, because the team has to work together. We know that. And so if you can have those honest conversations, we'll be better served. And again, if someone's really being challenging, you'll see it on the airlines. We're asking passengers to get off planes. If they're not adhering to the guide rails, then you can't fly. It's the same thing at work.
And I want to talk a little bit about, again, kind of projecting into the future of, folks that are coming into the office, maybe full-time, some that are coming in part-time, some that are, remaining remote. Historically, there's been a bias against folks that are working remote. And, that may be changing, but I think it may continue to exist because those people that are working in an office full time or on site, tend to have a little bit more those informal conversations we talked about. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe that future workforce and some ideas around how you might help those folks that are working remote still feel like they belong, still feel like they're part of the organization, and not have that anxiety about, hey, I missed that meeting because I wasn't in the office. There could be a real challenge around once people are in the office, all of a sudden they exclude the Zoom people because they don't think about it or it's not relevant, those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage that situation?
There is generally a bias on remote workers unless you're in the sales force. And 18% of our employees were formally identified as not being attached to a physical location. Most of them were in sales. And there is a perception, if I can't see you on a regular basis, therefore you must not be working as hard, or you don't care about your career as much as I do, right? There's this perception out there. I think we have an opportunity to span that. I am trying to remove the lexicon of remote worker. I think we're called digital workers going forward. And we can work anywhere, and it will open up the doors to diverse candidates. It will create opportunities for so many people that we have to embrace it and lean into it. We should look at people's work product, not if they're physically in an office. I am more productive working in a digital way than I was in the physical office. And when I reflect on that, what did I gain by being in a physical office? What I gained by the physical office is the opportunity to get others' energy. I can feel it more if it's in person. That's true. I can use an opportunity to get up and walk from building to building, or jump in the restroom really quick and figure out a snack really quick, and don't have to tell people I have to take a bathroom break. Now with Zoom, all the time I gotta go, excuse me, I gotta go to the restroom, I gotta take a break and get off a video and mute myself and run away for a minute or two and come back. So I think there's definitely gifts there, but I don't want that bias of being remote to continue. I think we can create more opportunity for more employees around the globe, open up our aperture of amazing talent, and do so with grace. That this is something that we should not go backwards in. I think we have to resist the urge to have a bias, negative bias of being a digital worker. I think most of us have workers around the world, and I think they kick butt. They're phenomenal. I don't think of them as remote, even though they're in a building in Staines or in Singapore in an office. To me, they're still remote. They're actually digital workers, and we have to mature our thinking and stop the bias.
And I think, if I had to guess in talking with folks, a lot of the employees per se, really love the flexibility. I think the challenge might be in managing that kind of a workforce. I think it may be a whole different mindset for some management styles. And some folks may be good at it, and some folks may really struggle with it. And sometimes when people struggle, they just insist, hey, let's get it back to the way it was, because that's what I'm comfortable with, right? So
Yes.
What are some ideas for managers to or maybe an organization to retrain managers on how to effectively lead people remotely? What are some of the core principles that they need to kind of adhere to?
I think as you indoctrinate managers and leaders into your organization, in your orientation, in your ramp up learning moment, talk about the digital employee workforce. We're all digital. We just happen to use a workspace occasionally for certain needs. But start with the assumption we're all digital. Change the framing. And then if you change the framing, think about what is the best and highest output of that digital workforce to make sure we get discretionary effort and joy and creativity out of that workforce, and for yourself, because you are also an employee. Think about that freedom of choice. Think about the respect you want as an individual, as a leader. Indoctrinate that into how you lead and how you teach, and you will see that flow through the employee life cycle. Just reinforce it. We know bias creeps in when we go too fast. It's a fact. So you got to slow our neurological roll to be more aware, to do less harm, to be more appreciative of the uniqueness around us, and adapt. So that deep breathing I talked about earlier, Mike, deep breathe when you're thinking about being agile for your employees, because they deserve it.
And there's a question that came up that, and it always kind of comes down this route when we talk about remote and managing folks and things like that, and love to get people's perspectives on it. I think everybody's going to experience that person that goes out remote, says they love it, but is struggling, right? And could be struggling for many reasons. Maybe their home life isn't, that you have different time management things when you're working remote. Maybe they're not compartmentalizing very well, and social issues are really affecting their business, and their work habits and things like that. What's some advice for how to manage those kinds of folks? We all want to be empathetic to struggles that people are going through, yet there's work to be done, right? And somebody may not be performing at the right level, and you can't get them up to a certain point. What are some things that you can do with those remote folks to help them not only make the transition to remote, but then also be successful working remotely?
So wow, there's a lot there, Mike, in performance management and meeting people where they are and helping guide them in a respectful way. I have a couple things that come to mind. One is to have clear goals, the what and the how. Just be really clear on the goals, not on the hours worked. If I can be super efficient at my goals, and they're the right goals and they're the right things, and some weeks I don't have to work my 40 hours, I can do it in 30, and some weeks I have to work 60 because of something, that's on me. But don't keep changing my goals to fill up my bucket, right? We have goals for the role at hand. Some of those goals require you to interface and be on, meaning on the clock, talking to customers, figuring out part of a team to do X, Y, and Z. That's your gig. So you have to commit to that gig. If you can't perform that job, then let's have an honest conversation. There's only so much flexibility you can give. You got to get the job done. We're a business. The other thing is there's compassion for the seen and the unseen. When we are anxious, when we want compassion for ourselves, we tend to compassionately and empathetically with the individual in front of us. Say you're having a performance challenge, Mike, and you're struggling and you're dropping some balls, you're struggling with attending meetings, you're dropping off early, you're missing key action items from these meetings. And I'm always trying to catch you up because I know that your wife has COVID, or your child is struggling in school and is disrupting you and is having anxiety issues, whatever those causes may be. I have high empathy for you, Mike, and compassion for you. So I'm going to adapt and try always to make this work for you. But that's compassion for the seen. What I as a leader have to always weigh out is the unseen. What is the impact of me not holding you accountable, not getting the work done right? Because it's impacting our customers, it's impacting the employees that you serve, it's impacting their deliverables and creating stress for them. So for the one Mike, we may be creating way more stress and anxiety for 20, 30, 50 more people around you that I also am accountable for. So sometimes I got to say, Mike, take 2 weeks off, take a brief breathe, right? Take some time, take a mini LOA, whatever those policies are that work within your framework to get your house in order, right? Do you need a virtual tutor? Do you need support? Do you need a doctor? Do you need blank? Take care of yourself, because Mike, we have these goals. We need to meet business needs. And hopefully by the end of that time, you and I can talk about how to ramp you back up so you can achieve those goals. Because I know you want to be successful, but sometimes you're going to have to pause because the cost of being compassionate just for the one may cause greater harm for the many.
Yeah, and as you talk, I think it just goes back to creating that relationship and making that employee feel comfortable about being transparent on what's going on, right? It's hard to do, but I think your advice there is spot on. One other question that came through the group, and there's a couple that are related. It's around the virtual workforce and the rewards systems and the salary mapping of regions and things like that. Do you see that being modified? For example, you have an employee that's virtually in New York. They may traditionally require a higher salary or things like that because cost of living for the area than somebody out in the Midwest or something like that. How do you see that being reformed maybe in the future?
I don't know yet. We've always had what I would call regional or globalist roles that are, you will hire talent that will run a global position, that will be on a certain salary band that's agnostic of where they live because of the type of role they do and what the market demands. And that those will be in one bucket. But I think there will always be a geo differential, right? I think there will always be something that's unique to region, allowances and pay and cost of living and talent supply and demand, and all those will have nuances. From an affordability P&L standpoint, it's usually a yes and a plus. It's never going to be, I'm going to take down the salary of folks living in New York and Santa Clara, in Paris, to achieve a normalized global pay structure, because it won't work. It won't work. So I think there'll still be differentiation. Do I think that we'll have more of a global mindset in our benefits and some of our pay? Maybe, to be determined. But I know my hypothesis at this stage is that we'll have some geo differentiation.
Well, we have time for one more question. So I want you to look into your crystal ball, right, and give us all this, the future workforce, the future workspaces. It's a little bit related to a question that just got asked. What's your vision of that? Like, are we ever going to go back to a full-time office? If a vaccine's found, do we go back to a full-time office? What's your vision of, my sense is what we're going through is going to fundamentally change things, but I don't know that it seems like it's something different each week, right? So what's your vision of, 2 years from now? What does the office look like? What does the workforce look like? What are
I
your
think
thoughts on that?
I think we'll always have safety, mental and physical safety, as part of our employee experience model going forward. I think it's never been called out so dramatically as it has been now. I think we will remember pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. In the post-pandemic world, our health and health of others is going to be a predominant goal. And so our benefits and how we show up is going to be dramatically changed. I think our health and safety in how we travel and the physical place will be modified and more rigorous. I think society will look frown upon people coming into the office with that slight cough and fever because they're a hero, right? They work so hard. Moment will be, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Go away. Like that will change. I have a strong work ethic, as most of us do. And so when I have a slight cold and there's that meeting and I'm a leader, I should be the one in the room, right? And now I'm going to be, as a leader, I should not be in that room. I should do it virtually, right? It's given me freedom to stay home and not infect others. That will change. I think we will use the workspace differently for purpose, not for all day work, all the time, except for individuals that choose it, right? I think there'll be more choice. I'm not sure if the physical design of the workspace will change yet, because we went from office to cubes to open workspace to hoteling to not. I think flexibility in how you flow through a space while we're worried about physical safety will change. I think we'll become more aware as real estate and workplace leaders think through that. What does safety look like, right? To get you in and out, and the cleanliness commitment that we have. I think mass transit is going to change. If we, I've been talking to some local politicians and mayors throughout the Bay Area about mass transit. What would make you feel safe? If I'm on a shuttle, is it every other row in the shuttle empty and we're all wearing masks and we have air filtration, or is it every other row not enough because that's not really 6 feet? Where do we feel safe? People are shying away from Uber and Lyft unless they have a cleanliness thing. They want maybe more ride sharing. Maybe as co-workers, we agree that Susan Osgood, who's writing a question, her car is clean. She keeps her car immaculately clean. She's healthy. I'm healthy. My car's really clean too. So we have the same standards of cleanliness and healthy, bar and our families. And so I will ride share with Susan, where I might not want to ride share with someone else. I think ride sharing might be more of a thing. And maybe we give benefits and perks to those that ride share, right? That sign off on the health standards that we need and care about for our families and neighbors. I just know it's going to change. It's going to adapt, but those are some things that come to mind.
Well, thanks, Pat. As you were talking, I thought of about 4 questions that I could ask you, but we are out of time. I really appreciate you joining us today. Fascinating conversation, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So next week we have 2 sessions, one on Thursday and one on Friday. So please go out to the website and look those up and register if you are interested. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Happy Juneteenth, and hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you again, Pat. Really appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.